Good morning. I'd come here thinking that it was some kind of a chat with a few students, and now this quite intimidating crowd of teachers and students. I suppose all of you know why we are talking about reading literature, books this particular week. It's not just because this is the nationally celebrated reading day and reading work, but also because we are going to be, from tomorrow onwards, we are going to be the proud citizens of this first city of literature in India itself, the UNESCO City of Literature. It's an extraordinary kind of privilege that we here have. And we all assume that a literature city has to do entirely with literature, with books, with reading, when actually the UNESCO sees literature in much larger terms. It's not just in terms of reading, in terms of books, in terms of a certain kind of literature alone, but because our city has a great heritage of knowledge, not just in terms of books and reading, but in terms of knowledge that came to Calicut from all parts of the world. So one major aspect of the reason why Calicut became a city of literature doesn't have much to do with writers and with readers or teachers. It has to do with traders. Because traders for the last 2,000 years have come to Calicut from as far as Rome. Calicut is mentioned in the Bible as a place from where valuables were taken to the Middle East. We have one of the longest standing literary festivals in the world. One of the oldest literary festivals in the world is from Calicut. Does anyone know that? Anyone? Can you shout out the name of this literary festival? One of the key reasons why we were granted the City of Literature is because we have one of the oldest literary festivals in the world. It's not the KLF, which is only about 6 years old. Any idea, anyone? It's called the Revati Pattathanam. You must have heard of it, and I'm sure none of you have ever attended. It's a small kind of gathering every year near the Tali temple. But for the last more than 400 years, we have had this literary competition based mainly on Sanskrit. We have had traders who came from the Middle East. We have a great Arabic heritage. Malabar is a place where we have a special kind of dialect called the Arabi Malayalam. All of this came not just because of writers and readers and books, but because all kinds of people. We don't tend to think of traders as particularly literary kind of people. Literature especially has a certain kind of slight sneering contempt for trade, for merchants. And those of you who are into literature will know that kind of feeling. But traders have been very important in taking our literature from here to Rome or Arabia, bringing their literature here, so that there has been a growth of literature here. In Calicut, for example, we have a Portuguese sector, French sector. Now, many of you must have gone to the French bakery. It used to be part of a French sector in Calicut. There used to be there is a Gujarati street. So there are all these kinds of people who came from all parts of the world and from all parts of India to create a certain kind of composite culture. And it is because of this culture, not just because of literature and books alone, that we have been awarded this very prestigious status of a UNESCO City of Literature. The announcement, the proclamation, of course, will come only tomorrow. But we know we have been awarded this for the last 6 months, and it makes us part of a certain network of creative cities, about more than 50 cities throughout the world. Now people from other cities of literature will be coming to Calicut. We'll be sending our writers, our critics, our readers to other parts of the world. So it's a matter of great pride for us that we are the first city in India. India has very many cities that have a very great kind of prestige, a literary heritage, places like Calcutta, Lucknow, Ujjain, lots of places, but UNESCO thought that Kozhikode was the first city that should be honored with this title of the UNESCO City of Literature. So it's a matter of great pride and happiness for all of us today, wherever we go. And especially when you're going from a place like Kozhikode, not Calicut, most people outside Kerala can't even pronounce the name of our city correctly. Even the report of tomorrow's proclamation, I'm sure in half the reports outside Kerala will be Kozhikode or Kozhikode has been made the city of literature, something like that. So whenever we go out, we have at the very beginning, we have this problem of correcting the pronunciation of a city by others. But now, of course, we can say that, see, you don't know how to pronounce Kozhikode. This is the first UNESCO city in India, not Delhi, Calcutta, Chennai, Mumbai, whatever. Kozhikode is the first city, so that gives us a particular kind of privilege and status when we go out. So it is with this that we begin today's, let's say, chat about literature. So when you ask questions, it doesn't necessarily have to be just about literature, writers. Most people assume that it's about writing, so that we got this because we have a whole lot of writers, great writers in Calicut itself, people like M.T., Bashir, S.K. Pottekkatt, all of these. Those were very important in our getting this position. But it's not just about writers, it is about readers, it is about how literature has permeated the lived life of ordinary people in the city. When we first began to talk about this, I was part of the committee that began this process of application. So when we talked to Edinburgh, was the first city of literature back in 2004. We talked to the director of Edinburgh City of Literature, and we, as usual, we talked about our great heritage, about Revati Pattathanam, about M.T., about all these things. And then the director's question was, see, lots of cities have heritage. What have you done with it? That's what we want to know. And then when we began to investigate this, we discovered that the literature of the city has permeated almost every aspect of our society, especially schools and colleges. Almost every year, for example, you might know, or you must have taken part in Bashir's birthday celebrations, where children very often dress up as characters from Bashir books. A lot of people, I mean, I'm sure some of you here must have dressed up as Patuma or somebody from Bashir's works. This kind of adaptation of literature in schools, in colleges, ordinary kind of people, groups. We have an extraordinary number of libraries in Kozhikode. Can you guess how many libraries we must be having in Kozhikode? Roughly, to the nearest 50. Anyone raise your hands and try to guess? 400. 40. Anyone else? We have more than 550 libraries in Kozhikode alone. Lots of, if you look at small libraries, almost every bus stop has a small reading room and a library. We have about 70 publishers. And one publishing company entirely run by women. We have lots of private libraries. So this is not just about having a few writers. This is about how literature has permeated the lived life of ordinary kind of people. There is a park, a literary park right in the middle of the city with lots of statues of literary characters. I'm sure you must have gone to Ansari Park, but we don't even take a photograph of ourselves, a selfie before that photograph. Whereas if you went to Dublin, for example, everyone will take selfies in front of statues of James Joyce or Beckett or somebody like that. So we have that in our city, and that is what we are celebrating this week from tomorrow onwards. So that is the literary heritage of our city. It's not just about writers, it's not just about books, it's not about texts or printed books. It's about how a certain kind of culture has permeated our lives. But this also has to do with books. If you look at the history of the world, till around 1400, the life of the people, the lives were exactly the way it was 1,000 years ago, before. There was not much of a difference between life in 300 AD and life in 1300 AD. Not much of an advance, no scientific development at all. You can't think of, if I ask you to think of one invention made between, let's say, 1st century AD and 13th century AD, I'm sure none of you will be able to give an example of one invention. Or can you? Can you think of any invention before 1300 which was not there before the 1st century? We had the wheel, we had fire, we had agriculture, which we had for the last 8,000 years. And then in 500 years, an extraordinary series of revolutions happened. In 500 years, we put a man on the moon. We have sent a vehicle into outer space to take photographs of our solar system. And what is most important, all of you have all the libraries in the world in your pocket. That's an extraordinary kind of development to happen in the last 500 years. And why has this happened? Any guesses? It didn't happen the previous 1,000 years, it happened the last 500 years. Why? Almost all the inventions that you can think of happened in the last 500 years. All the developments, and all of this has to do with the invention of one thing, the printing press. Once the printing press came into being, books were cheap, books were distributed, people began reading books, and then there was this explosion of information that resulted in this. And we're having another kind of revolution right now with the invention of the internet. The same kind of explosion of knowledge that happened 500 years ago, so that in 100 years, the world is going to change completely in a way that we can't even dare to imagine. Your parents or your grandparents might never have imagined what life is like now, because nobody could predict in 1970 or 80, nobody could predict that in 20 years or 25 years, we would have this kind of access to everything. All of this so has to do with books, with reading, and of course books and reading are connected to the larger world of literature. So the discovery of books, beginning to have a passion for books, reading of books, has been central to the development of civilization. I'm sure all of you know the importance of all of this, but I just wanted to put that in historical perspective, how in 500 years there has been this revolution because books began to be available to everyone. In the next 100 years, another kind of revolution is going to happen because your reading has changed from the printed book into what you get on the internet. So that's why books are so important. Reading is so important.